Hey guys, it's Max. Today we're comparing Samsung's latest flagship phone, the S20 Ultra, against their previous flagship, the Note 10 Plus. Now I'm very curious about this because I want to see how big of a difference is there really? How much more are you gaining paying $1,400 for the S20 Ultra compared to now being able to buy the Note 10 Plus for as low as $650 on Amazon, which is shockingly low. I'll go ahead and leave a link to that down in the video description. Now I've just spent a week using the S20 Ultra as my main phone, and it's very interesting to pick up the Note 10 Plus after a long while. There is a massive difference of feeling in the hand. Now I thought the Note 10 Plus was a fairly large phone, but when you hold it side by side, not only is the S20 Ultra kind of a little bit taller, but the feeling in the hand is crazy. This feels like a phone from 3-4 years ago. It is much thicker, where this feels like a really thin slate in comparison. And you guys can see that just in the body alone, but then when we put the camera bump side by side, man, this thing is massive. Now there's only about 24 grams difference in weight, but holding him in the hand, it is a massive difference. And I have to say, the Note 10 Plus is definitely a lot more comfortable. But with that said, the S20 Ultra, even though it's taller and has a larger screen, it's actually slightly narrower, which makes it a little bit easier to grip in the hand, but it's not by that much. Now as far as controls, the Note 10 Plus has all the controls on the left hand side here, whereas the S20 Ultra, it has all the controls on the right hand side, and being right-handed, I much prefer that. Now let's take a closer look at those camera bumps, and it is hilarious to see the difference in just 6 months. 6 months ago, it looked like Samsung was trying to hide the camera bump. It is very minimal, barely sticks out. It is so minimalistic. And then with the S20 Ultra, it is massive. They're taking it to the max, and you could tell, or at least it seems like, they're taking cameras much more seriously. Now we're gonna talk about cameras a little bit more in just a bit. Now I've never been somebody that was really annoyed by camera bumps until I got my hands on this phone. It sticks out so much that the phone does not lay flat on the table. If you guys see right here, this one barely rocks, if at all, whereas this one, it doesn't sit straight. This end is higher than this end, and if you press down, look at that. It is just really funny. And the S20 Ultra is the first phone in many years that I actually have to use a case with, because this ends up cutting into my fingers and then I keep touching it. So I end up making it even thicker and even heavier, whereas with the Note 10 Plus, I don't have to do that. Apart from the buttons being on the right-hand side, there's one more physical difference that I really like about the S20, and that's the fact that the screen is barely curved over the edges. It's almost not noticeable, kind of like maybe an iPhone, just slightly more than that, whereas the Note 10 Plus has a much more extreme kind of curve, not as much as the S10. So Samsung is slowly kind of going away from that trend, and I'm really happy because that minimizes glare and I feel like it's more comfortable overall. So that is a good improvement. Now I've been very impressed with the in-display fingerprint scanner of the S20 Ultra. It's been very quick and very consistent. So let's compare it to the Note 10 Pluses. So as you guys see, it was just slightly faster there with the S20, a lot faster there with the screen being turned off. Big difference. So very interesting. If you're somebody that likes to turn on your phone when the screen is off, the S20 Ultra is definitely faster, as you guys can tell. But if you turn on your screen first, it's about the same. Now I do like that the Note 10 is a little bit more boxy in its design, which includes the edges of the display instead of more curved. And the S20 Ultra screen is just a tiny bit larger, as you guys can see, and the resolution on the tall end is actually slightly higher to accompany that. Now if we switch to 1080p mode, the S20 Ultra gives us one feature that we don't have on the Note 10, and that is the high refresh rate, 120 Hertz instead of 60. Now this makes a really big difference when you're going through, when you're scrolling through websites, when you're opening apps, along with these faster animations. It is just really, really nice and smooth. And putting these side by side, it's a big difference. Now it's hard to show you guys this on video with standard refresh rates. So here's a shot with slow motion so you guys can see the difference for yourself. 120 Hertz is also really nice if you're into playing games. There are a number of games now that support it and more to come out. So that does give it some advantage, especially if you play competitively. And in order to have that 120 Hertz, we also need a larger battery. So the S20 Ultra has a massive 5,000 milliamp milliamp hour battery compared to 4300 on the Note 10 Plus. But even though it has that larger battery, the real world battery life is worse by about 1 hour in screen on time if you're using that mode. But default, out of the box, it is set to 60 Hertz, and with 60 Hertz, the battery life will actually be slightly better on the S20 Ultra. Now, the Note 10 does have its own special feature that it includes. Instead of that 120 Hertz screen, we have Samsung's S Pen. Now, to be completely honest, I have never really gotten into the S Pen. I would use it for maybe the first week or so and then just keep it in the slot. But for those of people that are into it, you have a bunch of extra features and different productivity tasks that you could do with this. You could draw, you could take notes, it can recognize it and turn that into text. And I know a lot of people out there really enjoy using the S Pen, so that is what the Note 10 offers. The S20 Ultra seems to be using newer display tech, but when we max out the brightness, it is almost identical, and the Note 10 Plus actually might be just a little bit brighter. But if we look at the off-axis shift, the S20 holds its brightness just slightly more, and also doesn't get as blue when we look from the side, but it is also very close. Now, both of these phones can play back at 1440p 60 FPS with HDR on YouTube, which is awesome. It looks fantastic. They both look good, but I did notice a difference. The new S20 Ultra actually does a better job. The highlights over here get brighter, or on this side, and then the colors pop a little bit more, and it makes the overall HDR experience look better. It is clearly noticeable, and it's the best HDR video I have ever seen on a smartphone. These phones get so bright that I had to turn that camera above way down for you guys to be able to see all the highlights, and it makes everything look dark because this video isn't in HDR, but both of these look great. So the S20 Ultra does provide a better video experience, but how about audio? Let's go ahead and get into our speaker comparison. I have Dolby Atmos turned on with both, and you guys will let me know down in the comment section which one you think sounds better. Make sure to wear a good pair of headphones, and I'll give you guys my opinion. Let's get started. The S20 Ultra is definitely louder. It is substantial, and that will come in handy if you're listening to, videos, music in a loud room, sharing stuff, and especially if the content you're listening to is quieter than normal. I like having the extra volume, but something else was interesting that I was not expecting, and that is that the Note 10 Plus does sound better in terms of sound quality. At first I thought it was just because it was quieter. Maybe Samsung is just taking the same speakers and pushing them louder to make it sound worse, but then I turned it down by about 2 clicks. That made it about the same volume level, but the Note 10 Plus still sounded better. The highs are a little bit more clear, the mids sound a little bit smoother. So if you care about sound quality, the Note 10 Plus is the better way to go, but personally, I would choose the louder speakers. Now it's time to get into performance. Both of these phones use Snapdragon processors, but the new S20 Ultra uses the 865 compared to the 855. Both are 8 cores, and the frequencies actually line up very similarly. So let's test out the CPU and see what kind of difference we have. And as we expected, the S20 Ultra is more powerful, but what's also interesting is that both the single core performance and the multi-core performance is right at 22% more powerful. Usually it's not evenly balanced. So yes, the CPU is more powerful. Now how about the graphics? Let's test that out. And it looks like the Adreno 650 in the S20 is about 40% more powerful than the 640 in the Note 10 Plus. Now I do have to say that for most things you're gonna do, you will not notice a difference, and even in most games, because this graphics card is already more than enough, and a lot of games aren't pushing the graphics that much. But with that said, if you're playing at 120 Hz, you definitely want that extra performance, and it's also more future-proof. Now let's talk about another category of performance, but this time it's gonna be LTE speeds. The Note 10 Plus is not a slouch. Its modem is about twice as fast as the best iPhone available, but all the new S20s have 5G built in, and here you guys can see the speed differences when I pop my SIM in. We have 22.7 megabit per second download compared to 78.2. That's a massive difference. Now I'm using T-Mobile, which mainly has the sub-6 5G, and that helps penetrate buildings better into basements and also gives you some faster speeds. And you guys can see here, that makes a pretty massive difference. And I've seen up to 162 megabit per second with the S20 Ultra. So as far as performance, the S20 Ultra definitely is better, but that's only if your carrier supports it. It also depends on what city you're in. And if you're somebody that wants a Note 10 with 5G, you do have the option as well, but it does cost a lot more than the best deals you can get for the standard version. All right, guys, now it's time to talk about the cameras, and this is where it gets very interesting. Now with the S20 Ultra, Samsung is using their own Samsung sensors instead of with the Note and the previous Samsung flagships. They always used Sony sensors because they were the best on the market. Comparing the front-facing cameras, we have 10 megapixels here compared to 40. That is a massive difference. And then if we flip over to the back and we compare the main lenses here, we have a 108 megapixel sensor on the S20 Ultra compared to a 12. With the telephoto, we also have a 12 megapixel 2x zoom compared to a 48 megapixel 4x optical zoom that can go up to 108 times with their hybrid space zoom technology that they call it. Of course, that looks terrible, but it does, give you better results than using something like this. And then with the ultra wide, it actually flips this time. We have 16 megapixels compared to 12. Now, there is so much to test out, so much positives and negatives with this new camera, stuff like autofocus, night modes, actual binning. So we're gonna make a separate video where we are not only going to compare these two phones, but also throw in the S20 Plus into the mix that also uses Sony sensors to see how much of a difference is there really? Is it worth dealing with such a huge camera bump in actual real world shots and real world examples? So make sure you guys click subscribe, enable notifications so you guys don't miss out on that video. And now let's see which one of these phones is worth it. Let's talk about prices. The Note 10 Plus retailed at $1,100 when it launched versus $1,400 for the S20 Ultra 5G. Now, if you wanted to get the 5G version of this, it was $1,300. And keep in mind, there is a difference in storage by about double with the Note 10 Plus having 256 gig. Now, at this time, we have much lower prices. And as I mentioned at the start, you can get a Note 10 Plus for as low as $650 on Amazon. Of course, that is a renewed model, and I'll link it down below. But if you're willing to spend maybe another $150, $200, you can get a new one. So I usually don't wrap these up and tell you guys which one I would buy in a lot of cases, but in this scenario, I have to say that I would choose the Note 10 Plus. Now, there are things that I love about this phone. I love the 120 Hertz. I love the louder speakers. I love the HDR, and I really like the 5G that is built into here. But personally, holding both these in the hand, there is just something that is so nice feeling about this phone. The fact that it's much slimmer, much thinner, the camera bump doesn't stick out, and I know that this phone takes great images and it's very consistent, whereas this one hasn't been as consistent and has its issues at this time. So because of all of those things, and once we count for the price differences, I would say I would personally go with the Note 10 Plus. Now you guys let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Which one of these would you choose and why? Make sure you guys click that circle above to subscribe. And if you want to see a couple great videos on the S20 Ultra, click right over there. This has been Max, and I will see you in the next video.